Nicole Forte.
Oh my goodness.
But do you go by Nikki most of the time?
I do go by Nikki.
Okay, sorry to introduce you to my mother with the full Christian name, you know?
That's the only way to introduce somebody to your mother, though.
I guess at the same time, though, she meets all kinds of people with aliases for whatever reason they choose. Forte, is that a stage name, an alias, or is that...
No, that's my real last name on the birth certificate.
That is badass. A good friend of mine said you need to have less musicians and more like well-versed cast on this show. And you fit a lot of that category, diversifying, but you're kind of a musician at this point, you know? You're kind of just a band member.
I've been, I don't know, like welcomed in to the music community, I think, because of... just understanding what they're doing, you know, and when I take photos, you know, sharing all those photos, it really, you know, bridges those creative gaps together, which is nice.
That absolutely does. So before you had found photography and tattooing, was there... Well, actually, what was the horn instrument you were talking about playing growing up?
Oh, I was a trombone player.
That is badass. And so was that your first introduction to music and your involvement in music?
No. So when I was a really small child, I used to go to church with my aunt and uncle, and he was the pastor. No, he was not the pastor at the time. Sorry, he was a deacon at the time. He's the pastor now. And he would preach, and they would have the choir, and both of my aunts were involved in the choir, my Aunt Angie and my Aunt Peggy. And I grew up with my Aunt Peggy being around the corner from our house when I was a little kid, and my Aunt Angie was still very young when I moved in with my grandmother, so she was like a big sister, for, you know, more than an auntie.
Yeah.
And so I would follow around like a little puppy dog and want to sing in the choir with her and like jump into the children's choir and do the, what do they call them? Like they had like these kind of, it's funny because I feel like my church was sort of like one of those variety shows from the 60s, because it'd be like singing and then there'd be some talking and then there'd be like a talent, you know. So, I'd get up and like memorize scripture and, you know, do...
And recite it as a kid?
And recite it, yeah.
Were you nervous being in front of people like that, or was that just a place for it?
Well, that church was very small. I mean, I swear the sanctuary is probably about the size of this room. Yeah, and then like...
And you were out in L.A.?
No, I would come back to Ohio. So I was born in Los Angeles, and I would spend split time between my father and my mother. But my mother was mentally ill, so sometimes she would be in a hospital, and so I'd stay with my grandmother.
Gotcha.
It's a whole windy thing. And she has a bunch of siblings, and so sometimes I'd be with one aunt or another aunt, you know, for a little while. And the one that usually would try to mother me the most is the one who is the closest in age to my mother, which is my Aunt Peggy.
Gotcha.
So that's why, you know, I went to church all the time, and I hated it for the fact of the dressing.
Yeah, is there any bigger juxtaposition, though, to growing up in L.A. and then going to small church, like rural Ohio kind of vibes? Like
my dad was a Catholic, so it was a huge cathedral type, you know, church environment, very strict, very rigid. The choir had... You know, it was epic. It was like going into a concert. You know what I mean? It's, you know, ridiculous. And then, you know, you go to my auntie's church and everyone's like stomping on the floor and they got fans and they're like throwing their hats and it's amazing. Like a Pentecostal kind of vibe. So,
and it was the outfits you said that didn't sell you?
Yeah, because I have a sensory disorder. So like for me, things that are, I can't wear wool to this day. I can't wear swishy things. I can't wear corduroy. Like if I feel it or hear it weird, I can't with it. It'll make me cringe. I don't want to peel it all off. So I was in all these little fluffy dresses with like crinoline and
like the bouncy shoulder pads.
Oh yeah, it was like the 80s, dude. You know what I mean? Like the puffy little sweater, you know, bolero type, you know, little short sweaters and stockings. Oh, stockings. I'd sweat so bad.
Yeah, that sounds like a violent experience, especially as a young person, where it's like putting a young boy in a suit is a disaster to start. But what they do to young girls, where it's like, we're going to make you look like an American Girl doll.
Yeah.
And that pretty much means like, 1800s kind of garb. Like,
absolutely.
I play Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper every once in a while, and I always introduce it as my favorite musical work from the soundtrack of Napoleon Dynamite. And I just remember that scene where they're at the prom and she has those gigantic fucking shoulder pads.
Oh, God, yeah.
And so that's what I'm envisioning you having to wear to Sundays where these people are stopping and getting after it. It's like, no wonder you need a fan. It's because you got a collar on with like...
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, just all this like lace and buttons and frills and bows. And, you know, and my Aunt Angie and I look a lot alike. We just talked about this at Thanksgiving. Like, I mean... She's not much older than I am, so I wasn't like quite daughter looking. But definitely you could tell like we were in the same family, we looked so much alike. And so anytime she would dress up, she would dress me like her. Even in her wedding, God, we were talking about this. Even at her wedding, I had a mini version of her wedding gown as her flower girl. I literally only have to do one thing like for 2 minutes, and that's just toss flowers and then stand there and try not to freak out and, like scratch the entire wedding.
And the one time that you're supposed to also wear white to a wedding is when you're mini-meing for someone.
Yes.
Like, that's very Austin Powers of you. Like,
She just made a little carbon copy, of herself and me. It was really cute.
That's all. Now, did you find out at an early age, like the terminology say, like, I don't do well with this style of clothing. It irks me, and it's a sensory disorder. It's not just me being particular.
So I was tested when I was a kid. I was probably 4 or 5, and I think it was at like Wright State or something like that, because I had so much weird, quirky things about me. I could never sit in chairs still. I would have to like right now it's taking everything in me not to like turn around and throw my legs over this, as opposed to sitting so rigidly, this way. I'm an adult now, so I have to control that. But as a little kid, I didn't. And my grandma would always say, "You're not ladylike," because I wanted to climb a tree, or I wanted to do cartwheels, or I wanted to, just all this energy, no focus on anything unless I really, really loved it, you know? So I'd sit there and pound through books. I mean, days, hours and hours and hours of read through these books. She'd give me one homework assignment, and I do everything in my power to avoid that, assignment. So they're like, something's up with her. She's not like a normal girl.
Yeah.
She's not behaving girly. She's, I was not agreeable as a kid,
And when it came to the scripture stuff, like, could you memorize like large swaths of materials?
Whole, like whole psalms and things like that, prayers, all that stuff. I mean, even between the Catholicism too, like, Hail Mary, all that, just like all these long-winded type like I knew it like the back of my hand. And it's so funny because as a Catholic, they changed some of the prayers in some of the masses, and so it still fucks me up when I go and I say the wrong thing, like peace be with you, and also with you. Like if I say that,
I was in the 8th grade when all that stuff changed, so like it was just enough to like realize how rigid you were. But to me, it's almost like those kind of things are like songs where it's less words and it's more sounds, and you get in the cycle of it, and you can just run it down. It's like it's incredible to see the way that I have a horrible memory. But if I start the song, we can run it. If you interrupt me in the middle of it, I have no idea what's going on. I can't pull the second verse without the first verse coming. It's like, so it's weird that you have this, small storage in the back of your head that's recitations in that kind of a way.
Oh yeah, and when I used to play in band, that was after I was tested. So they said that I did have something like up with me, but they didn't know what to call like, neurodivergence at the time, or like there was no ASD. It wasn't like autism spectrum. Like basically boys only got autism or ADHD. So whatever I had going on was just whatever.
It couldn't be the same thing.
It couldn't be the same thing, right? And it manifested differently, right? So, but I'm the same way when it's music or something like that, because I learned to read music in band. Oh my God, if I heard one person off, I couldn't stop cringing, or I would have to stop everything I was doing and like, we got to reset this. You know what I mean? I could not flow, or like pick up and compensate when I was a kid. I was just so rigid. Yeah. In that, and so that made it really difficult for the kind of music I wanted to get into. I thought I was going to be Gwen Stefani with a trombone. I really did. I loved ska. Going back and seeing my father, and then like all the shows that'd be going on around. Because I mean, this is like late '80s. So, No Doubt was still doing bars. Red Hot Chili Peppers were still doing like little, venues and stuff like that. So you'd see all these posters and like all these, these people that now I'm just like, holy crap, if I'd known, I mean, great, I was a little kid, but like if I'd known then, that they were going to be this ridiculously huge,
Would have kept some shit, held on some tickets.
Man, like people would drop ticket stubs outside of the venue. I should have picked that stuff up,
Yeah. So what was like your access to the music scene around then? Did you have a car at a young age? Could you go out to the...
No, my dad liked music a lot. So and I mean, I hate to say it, but he drank a lot. So it was like if there was a bar, there's music. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of musicians too. It's just like one of the things that we have a hard time doing is going to a show and not having anything to do with ourselves. So you put a drink in your hand, you're a little more comfortable. You put a camera in your hand, you're a little more comfortable. It's like, when you participate, it feels a little bit better than just standing around and watching the thing. You have to be a very particular type to just enjoy that and take it in.
Oh yeah, and so and I've never been able to just sit and enjoy and like take things in. Like I said, my brain is always, and clattering, and because I didn't have any intervention or know what to really do with that, I couldn't verbalize certain things. So like how you said earlier, could I say something about my itchy dress? Like not really,
Yeah.
because being so particular and disagreeable was not ladylike or not. I'm being a bad girl. Things like that. And so it's just like, okay, I won't talk about that. I mean, I couldn't even go to restaurants sometimes. It would be too overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I'd hide under the table. Like, because I could hear these people talking over here, and I could hear her doing the orders, and I could hear this ringing through, and I couldn't make it all make sense or, like, push it out.
Yeah. So in your tattooing studio, do you work by yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that kind of helps eliminate that. It's like, because all of this sounds like the worst conditions possible to be in like a busy tattoo parlor.
But that's what the challenge of doing photography at shows was for me, because so my mom was a photographer, like amateur. She really liked taking photos. She loved to paint. I think I get all that from that side of the family. But my dad used to draw a lot too. But I think that you're right. It gives me something to do and to focus on, because it's the only thing that can let me block that out. When I'm at a show, just to watch a show, I can't stand it. Mm-hmm. I really can't. I can't be still in a seat. I can't stand, and it's like I feel too much of everybody around me, and it's too distracting from what I'm watching. But if I'm doing a job, then I have to watch, and I have to be present in that. And so it's a way of filtering all that stuff out.
Yeah, and when you're really working on your camera, do you feel like you still hear the show, you hear the people, or is it almost like a sensory denial in that?
It's like total tunnel vision, yeah. It gets to be, I like, there are times where, and this is why I don't write when I shoot a show, because I will not know what 3 songs that they played. I won't. Even if I know the band really well, like I will, it's like it turns off and I'm just looking for the shots. But I'm also looking at the lighting. So I will go to certain venues, and I will, like, certain venues have the same lighting guy, right? Mm-hmm. So I can tell when it's that guy, the other guy, or if they brought their own lighting guy. Just the scenes that they'll put out. Yeah. You know what I mean? How they're doing the stage presence and things like that. And so I'm constantly like trying to read that, where they're moving, predict where they might move to. I watch videos of bands before I go, and that way I can see, like, okay, how energetic is that guitarist? Is he a jumper?
Yeah.
Is he a swayer? What about that bass player? Does he slap a lot? Like, what's he doing, so that I can kind of get, that shot of them in their zone or in their zen moment. And
are you kind of envisioning settings as you're going? Do you take notes of these things? Do you just get an idea, so when you get there, you don't have to be surprised by that?
There's no way to really, like, fully predict it, so I'm constantly changing. I'm shooting like this, and my thumbs are doing this the whole time, because I'm constantly adjusting, and I can see it all inside the viewfinder, which is why I don't shoot like this. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or, like, like, not to talk smack about other photographers, but I really hate when they have the digital screen and they're just doing this, because even though you can see what's happening, it's weird to me to not be able to, like, really control what you're doing and to be so disconnected. But maybe that's because me being in the viewfinder also helps that tunnel vision for me, so that I'm not reading everybody else.
Yeah, that literally is the tunnel. You see nothing but the frame. And,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it seems like the things that you enjoy have that level of hyperfixation, mm-hmm. that you get the best out of people when you can eliminate all this external. And it's like, being as empathetic as you probably are, you can feel a good show versus a bad show and what's going on there. You don't need to hyper focus on the song or these people or what's going on in the room. It's like, I walk out of here with the feeling of whether it went right or not. So we can kind of just ignore that aspect of it.
Oh yeah.
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 So when was the first time that you left home with a camera? Like, was this your mother's equipment and you were just giving it a try?
So I would follow her around, and then she had a family friend who, he was an actual professional photographer, still does gallery showings and all that stuff, and he's wonderful. His name's Kevin, and he had been my mom's best friend, knew my whole family, all that stuff, and would, take me and my mom or like my aunt or whatever, and, like, go to parks and things like that and take photos. Took some incredible photos of me as a child. It's some of the few photos that I still have left from my childhood, actually. And so I would follow, but I could never afford anything. I grew up so my dad lived in, like, the southern part of Los Angeles, where it's, like, mostly pretty hood, and he moved around a whole lot because he kind of couldn't manage his damage. And then my mom, same thing, Dayton, the west side of Dayton. So all project homes for the most part, stuff like that. So there was no room for a camera. And if we even bought one, I couldn't go running around with it because someone knew I had something that was pawnable.
Yeah.
So it was disposable cameras or, the little, God, I'm showing my age, but like the little ones in the cardboard, right? If we could do that, that'd be like a treat. That would be like a whole birthday present or Christmas present because I liked it. And I'd only have like 24 frames
Yeah.
so I'd save it. I'd like take one big group picture and then like, hold on, like, cherish that.
Yeah.
I think that's also why I don't like to just rack off shots. Even though I have a digital camera and I can do so, I will stop in the middle of the song to like reassess a lot because in my mind, I'm still working with film. There's still that whole sort of feeling of like, I got to get it right in the camera.
But that probably helps your editing process to not have
Tremendously.
You're not choosing between the three best. It's like, this is the one picture I have of this moment. So whether it's perfect or not, we got to go somewhere with it.
Right. The only time I have like ridiculous amounts of frames is when I go do the racetrack because they're moving so quickly that I do like a rapid fire hit. So it's like 6 frames per second. And that's to try to capture, those like little moments. My favorite thing is whenever a car is going so fast that their tires buckle and you can see like wrinkles in the tire.
Yeah.
The rubber just,
That's going to be a wild piece of equipment to capture that moment.
Well, if it's daylight, most cameras will.
Yeah.
There's nothing super incredible about the gear that I have. Again, broke as hell. Mom of 2, or, I have like 2 kids. I mean, they're grown now, but gosh, while they were growing up, just, rubbing 2 pennies together, paycheck to paycheck,
Yeah.
And so I always got everything refurbished or used. I've never bought a brand new camera. I've never bought a brand new lens. It's all like refurbished, store displays, what have you. And I think it's that whole fear of like, again, like when I was a kid, you don't have nice things or expensive things because you're basically bringing it in that someone's going to take it from you, which is a weird thing because I grew up like having that mindset for such a long time that I think it kept me from doing the things I actually really wanted to do because I was always afraid it was going to get taken.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and as an adult, as you can afford your freedom and afford your space to choose whether to go with the new or to go with the used, it's like, yeah, there's some parts of just the way you view the world that'll never change from that. But also, like, it's a freedom to not be obsessed with the brand new or replacing this. It's like, it's more about what it does, not what it could be.
Exactly. And that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be free of that concern, even if it's not through the best, mechanism of having to worry about that. Like you had talked on Class X about, walking through some of these downtowns, knowing that you're carrying, $5,000 of equipment. It's like, well, I know 2 things. 1, it's not the most expensive camera in the world, and 2, I could beat some ass if time. It's like worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario. It's funny because it wouldn't pawn for that much. So anybody who would steal from me, it's like, good luck, bro. But yeah, if all of it was bought, brand spanking new. But again, depreciation's everything. So even if it's brand spanking new, it's going to depreciate. I try to look at things in ways of like, yeah, how does this help me achieve my dream? How does this help me get this job done? That's the usefulness of it, not how much it costs or what brand name is attached to it.
Yeah.
Because you can make almost anything work, in the right set and setting. So, there are people who say, well, I only use Canon because this brand loyalty. I only have an iPhone. I only have and I'm like, okay, great. But you're looking at what I'm doing and I'm getting something equivalent to what you're getting with a whole different spectrum of tools. So rethink your position. Is it the brand name on it or is it you? Are you the one who's creating this? Yes. But people offset that. They'll it's like we're afraid to like own our own greatness or goodness or skill set and wherever we are. And so it's easy to offload it on, well, I only use Leica because it's the best, or I only use this because it's the best and that's why this turns out so good. It's like, no, it's you. It's you. You know what you're doing. I could give you one of those little stupid box cameras and you're going to figure out how to make art out of it.
Yeah. Do you ever still buy one of those just to go out and to only have 24 shots and make something in that kind of way?
I haven't in a long time, but I kind of think I should.
Yeah.
Yeah, because my kids have Polaroids and I never thought that'd come back around again.
No, it's bizarre the way that like Like I see so many people doing the disposable camera thing, and like that's more precious to them. And as many times as they try to make an Instagram filter look like a VHS tape, it's like you're better off just getting the worst VHS camera you want. If you want to distort, that's the romance. You can't digitally make that in that kind of a way.
Yeah. And it's set in a certain time, right? So like when people, when I see old VHS footage, like say in a documentary, I am instantly right back wherever I first saw that. So, I'm like, oh, that's 80s, 90s. You know what I mean? Like, so when you try to fake it, it throws you off. It's like that uncanny valley kind of thing where it's like, it's just enough wrong that I know it's not truly retro. I know it's not really from a VHS. I know it's really not analog. I mean, I hear it in music a lot. Even when I go buy vinyl, I can tell they didn't do an analog recording.
Do you really feel that way? Like you can tell that it wasn't produced. Well, I can agree in some sessions. Just like I can tell that you used a deluxe board, first in its class, versus you made this on a MacBook. It's just like it's the translation of vibrations to vibrations that feels real in that regard. But I don't know that I've ever really tried to pinpoint if I could hear that or not.
Yeah, I think it's like a subconscious thing.
Yeah.
Like I didn't really focus in on it until I was with somebody else who is a big vinyl person, and they mentioned it too, and I was like, oh, that's what I'm hearing. You know what I mean? That's what I'm hearing that makes it just that little bit wrong.
Yeah. It's always interesting when you pull back the veil on something like that, and you can never unsee that veil. Like you're always looking at Oz. You're never looking at the wizard, Right.
I never had words for that specific feeling that I had, and then when I was with somebody who was so much more well-versed in that, I was like, oh, yeah, that's what it is. Because I kept kind of doing this while we were listening, and he's like, what? And I was like, it just sounds wrong. Or, or it just, there's something about it that just didn't feel right or sound right. And I couldn't express it because, again, I'm not, a professional musician. Like, I quit playing trombone when I got to college, and I was so broke. I sold cameras, all my, anything I could sell to try to like make ends meet and work. And then it was just like work. And then right after college it was kids, and it's work. And so I never, picked it back up. And so I don't consider myself like a musician. Like I played music as a kid, you know what I mean? And I sang a lot as a kid, and I was in competitive choir type situations and stuff like that when I was in school. But like, and I was in theater, but it's like I left it behind to do the safe thing. You know what I mean? Like I left it behind to do corporate work.
And I know you had talked about kind of leaving that and kind of reclaiming that freedom. Was that when it's a means to an end, we can all resent that for just being the demand in our life to equate to financial freedom, healthcare, whatever the fuck. Now when you look back on that chapter of your life, is it still the same feeling of kind of being crammed into this, or was it just relearning a new skill?
So I don't know how rephrase that.
Do you still feel the same negative sense of what corporate life was as when
now
you're
that I'm outside of it? Ooh, yeah. So that's actually a really good question. I still have this like emotional response whenever I think about going back to getting a job. Like whenever it's slow at the shop or there's not a lot of shows, and I think, I'll just pick up some holiday work, or I'll pick up work at an office. I got to fill some space. The kids don't need me as much anymore. They can handle themselves. They have cars and jobs and whatever. So like they can do their own thing. I should be making more money. I have these goals I want to achieve. Put the nose to the grindstone and do it, and I will get queasy filling out that application for that job. You know what I mean? Like it's like, ugh, like just this whole thing. And what's so funny is that it comes from a place of desperation. The only time that I want to go back to that is when I just feel like I don't have enough of something, and I realize I'm in a lack mindset. So when I realize that, and then I get that physical response from thinking about like a corporate gig or a retail gig or what have you. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It just isn't for me personally. I just don't thrive in it. And so I will get that physical response. And then I have to sit there and go, okay, I need to let this go. I need to let this desperation go because I'm blocking something. So I'll fill out the application. I've done 4 interviews in the past like 2 months because I thought, man, with this move, it's so expensive, and I need that extra money, and I want to pay down this credit card and do just like all these things. I need practical, like I need money for this, right? But it's a need. It's like I need it. And so the more I was trying to get it, every interview went great. Everyone's like, oh, we'd love to bring you on. Ghost. Silence. And I kept thinking, man, why can't I just make this work? Why can't I just get this job? And then I go, ugh, do I really want to do this? And then all of a sudden, I'm just like, I got to let this go. Like, it's going to work out. The move will be fine. It'll work out. And as soon as that happened, money starts coming in. People start booking appointments. People start texting me. Just there's something about that when you need it, or when it's like a desperate grab for it, that it gets further and further away, or it seems like that. It could be a perspective thing, that it's just not happening fast enough because I'm impatient. So, yeah, I don't regret having corporate jobs in my past. It's the means to an end. It's how I raised my kids. It's how I was able to fund. It's funny because my 401k from my job that I quit right before I started tattooing is what paid for my shop to be open. I just cashed it out. I was like, screw it. So I don't look back on it resentfully. Like, I don't resent the people I worked for. I don't resent that, but there is still something in me that's just like, don't ever go back to doing that again.
Yeah.
Don't do that to yourself. You don't need it. That's not for you. It's just not for you.
Well, as someone that works so hard in the gig economy, you kind of talked about, like, if you have one of these 9-to-5 jobs, it's you blow through things and you're sitting there wondering why you still have to be in this office if you knocked out everything. It's
oh my God, that was such a nightmare.
For folks that it's not even overachieving. It's just it's a diligence of tasks.
Right.
I think the hardest workers are the most underutilized in those kind of environments.
Mm-hmm.
And you either obsess over the corporate ladder and the money that comes along with it, or you start to wonder what else you can do with the small amount of time that we get to be on a planet, enjoying a healthy body and a decent mind that can do these things. It's like, it's not too long before any of us end up in the ground or in a home, There
was nothing worse to me than being in a beautiful office with big, huge windows where I could see what I was missing every day. People will say, oh, I want that office with the window view. And I'm like, no, you don't, because you don't want to watch the world go by you literally for 10, 12, 15 hours a day because you're a high-end lawyer, or you're, doing these kind of jobs where it occupies so much of your time that you're just watching life happen. I'd rather be in a cubicle, you know what I mean, and like lose track, you know what I mean, of whether the sun is rising or setting or not, you know what I mean? Like because I can focus on my work, and just knock that out, and not have that temptation. Man, I wish I was outside. I wish I was doing this. I wish I was, I wish I was taking a hike right now. It's been a perfect day today,
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was like that at school. I'd sit there and stare out the window, Nikki, Nicole, come on, you know what I mean? Because I was like, there's so much out there. I could never know it all. Even as a kid, I realized, like, there's so much out there. It's beyond me.
Yeah.
Like, it was scary sometimes to me. It would make me feel so small.
So in your tattoo studio, do you face away from the windows when you work?
A lot of times I do, you know. But with that, it's not. So that's where having the windows was kind of nice, because knowing that I have control, like I can book the appointment, I can set the time threshold, of how long we're working together. I can cap myself. I can say, listen, I'm going to work 6 hours today between this and this so that I don't miss all of this. And so I can kind of joggle that around, and then I do have days totally free, whereas with my corporate job, it was like I was always on call. They could call me. I worked for a printing company, large format presses and print. So we would do like billing statements and the most boring shit, right?
Yeah,
they needed
soul sucking.
Those stupid annoying flyers. I'm sorry for everybody, but like those stupid flyers you get in like little magazines you get like in the mail that are just addressed to addressee, or current family at whatever address. Like we used to make all that, and then produce all that, and even just being there was soul sucking, because I would just run or watch these presses run and just all this waste. You know what I mean? Just all this paper, all this ink.
Yeah. It's painful to get spam mail, let alone to make spam mail. Like,
yes. I am the cause of people's annoyances trying to get out of their mailbox every day.
You're the reason the postman has a bad back.
For real. For real. And I was just like, ugh. It was, it was such a draining experience. But yeah, like the tattooing and having the light and then being able to say, okay, like I want to be out before it gets dark.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make sure I get this done and stand on business and get this, racked out and get this done so I can, get out and enjoy the rest of the day. Or I'm going to take these days off. I'm going to block this time because I can. I don't have to go in at 2 a.m. for those big presses because one of them shut down, and then I have to go be the person to go, okay, like what happened? And it was some stupid coding issue or something was a GIF and not a JPEG or what. It was stupid stuff, you know what I mean? And like, I don't have to run in and do that. It's not an expectation. I don't have a quota to hit. I mean, a personal goal, yes, but like I don't have like some arbitrary number I'm supposed to hit or anything like that.
For someone else's needs. It's
for someone else's needs.
Yeah.
I've always had an aversion, and I feel like it makes me sound kind of selfish, but I've always had an aversion to giving 100% to anything that I can't see there's nothing that comes back from it because my paycheck was lackluster. Did I make more money back then? Yes. But there was just something when it's just deposited in your account.
Yeah.
There's nothing really gratifying about that when you just get a check. There's nothing gratifying about that. But, when you do a job where like you can see someone's face light up, where they give you a hug, it's a whole different ball game as far as like the value that goes into it. Then they, they're handing me money or they're sending it through Cash App or Venmo or whatever, but like there's something different about accepting that, even though it's not, like I said, it's not corporate level stuff, but I also have way more time on my hands. Like,
Well, I think anytime you're working for someone else's gain or someone else's goals and metrics and what they tell you is worth your time, it's like, well, there's never going to be a dollar amount that satisfies how empty that feels. Because now I think that money is going to be able to fulfill me outside of here, but I don't have time to do that, nor do I have the energy to do that. Most folks that are chasing the corporate dollar just don't have the life, kind of flowing through them because they're stuck in there all day. And you hope a vacation at the end of the year where all you do is drink yourself into a hole is going to make you happy. It's like, these aren't the experiences that are meaningful.
Right.
But I want to start to get into your tattooing journey.
Okay.
But the most important question is, what was your first tattoo? And did you know before then that you were saving up for this? Did you already kind of have it preconceived? Or was it just the day came and you wanted one?
You mean me getting tattooed?
Yeah, your first tattoo.
Okay. So my first tattoo, Lord. Okay. So we're going way back to the 1900s. Actually, no. Well, yeah. So 98, I walk into a tattoo studio. I'm in high school, and I have looked and sounded like this since I was like 14. Okay. So it's like I went from like little cherub, fat-faced kid to grown-ass woman over like a summer, right? It was harsh. It was brutal. I didn't know what to do with myself. I was very awkward and gangly, and like I didn't know. So I, think, oh, I'm a big girl. I can go into this tattoo studio, and I'm going to talk to him about a tattoo. And I go into this studio, and it's so funny because years later I figured out his name's Derb, and he owns Hell City Tattoo Convention. Like, he's real big in the industry now, but at the time he was tattooing in another shop, and I'm in near campus in Columbus because I went to go live with my aunt in Columbus. And I go in there and I have like a sketchbook full of drawings of like what I want to get tattooed. He's like, nope, you're not even old enough. Didn't let me even really get words out edgewise, just like, nope. So I was like, so I was like, rejected. So now I'm like really gung ho. I'm getting a freaking tattoo, right? Like, I want this. I want to do this. Go to another shop and met like the creepiest guy who it just was like, oh, you're cute. I was like, okay, don't want this either. Like, I don't want instant acceptance because he's like trying to lay a fucking teenager, right?
Oh, God.
Not to be too rude, but
No,
it is what it is.
You can feel that as
That's part of it. It happens. So there's that. And so my first experiences with tattooists was one guy who kind of like big brothered me and was just like, no, I'm not touching you. Like, you're a kid. Fucking figure that out, right? Didn't know me from anything, right? And then another guy who's just like, oh, you look like a piece of meat. Like, do you see what I'm saying? It was like very weird. So I waited till after graduation, and then I went to Dayton, and I met a guy, Brian Brenner, and he owned a shop. At the time, it was called New Breed. It's changed names. It's Truth and Triumph now. but it was New Breed then, and he opened it with a guy named Saint Mark, who was on like Ink Master and stuff like that.
Cool.
And, you know, much later on, and his brother Monty. I guess they grew up around the area that I, you know, kind of came from too, and they were partners in this, you know, this shop, and it was, I mean, so brand spanking new. They're still painting the walls when I walked in, and I'd also gone to another shop, Glenn Scott. And Glenn himself was an amazing man, but a little bit older, biker, you know, what you would think of a stereotype of a, you know, biker tattoo guy. And he was not there, that's who I was recommended to go see. He was not there, and some younger dude was there, and he was like, oh, you don't want all that. I want like a back piece, right? Like I was going hard, right?
From the get?
From the jump.
How long is it between going with the sketchbook, getting denied, and then someone kind of creeping you out to this?
3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is over a 3-year period. So from 98 to like 2001. So like I finally get in there, and I'm in Dayton, and I go into see this guy, and he's like, yeah, no, why don't we start you off with like a little butterfly or something? Make sure you can handle it. So now I'm really like, I'm doing this, like, fuck, rejection, you know what I mean? Like, just no. And so I was like, okay. So I go in, I talk to Brian, and he introduces me to another artist named Chris, and I show him my sketches, and he's like, these are actually really good. He's like, I can do something like it, but I'll have to do it in my style. Hope you don't mind I'm changing it. I was like, no, that's kind of what I want, is someone to take this, but kind of make it something that they would be proud of seeing too, right? You know, like it's for me, but it's also as an artist to another artist, you know, I want you to be able to say, like, I proudly did that, you know, that tattoo. So he works on me, and we blast out my back. I think it was like 2 6 or 8 hour sessions of me just like laying down or like sitting forward like this, you know, in like an awkward chair, eating Skittles and reading comic books. Like that's pretty much my whole like thing.
Oh my God.
And I got the back, like the nape of my neck. So it starts like back here. It starts like back here, and then like it's, yeah, shoulder to shoulder and down.
How close are these 2 6 to 8 hour sessions?
I'm sorry?
How close are the 2 sessions that you did this?
Oh, I think there were like 3 weeks in between to heal the first and then go on to the next. And
oh my God.
yeah, I just sat there, and then he did my chest and my hips. I have, you know, 2 big pieces there, and it was going to be like a full bodysuit kind of thing. And then I made the mistake of going out with the guy. Not that that was the mistake, but like you don't date your tattoo artist, because like that can ruin, like if you split, then you're not going to that artist again, obviously.
Yeah. Like you talked about, like it's so intimate at that point. Like this person's really gotten to know you conversationally, but also like there's a lot of physical intimacy that goes into that, whether it's comfort or just being there for that person.
Right. And so I was like, okay, so can't get tattooed by him again.
Yeah.
And then Brian did like my sleeves, which was really awesome, because he's always been a really cool friend to have, you know, just someone that I kind of knew over all these years. And a great business person too. You know, he's had a lot of shops and, you know, experience in the industry, does conventions. He did like all the little bits and pieces of it. But yeah, so that was my first, my back piece was my first tattoo.
Unbelievable.
I don't think I even had like a second hole in my ears. Like that's how like blank of a slate I was to everything.
Well, and I've always been under the impression that like your first tattoo will probably be your least favorite, because you walked into it with a totally different notion of what tattooing was versus when you came out and you'd gone through the experience. Mm-hmm. You probably don't feel that way about a back piece. Like, do you feel relatively proud that you started with such a large undertaking?
I think not so much proud of that, but I'm glad that I went big, because sitting through my sleeves was easy, because I already endured all that. I think when you get like a tiny tattoo first, you get too ballsy. It's like, oh, I handled that. That was fine. That was nothing. And then you go and try to do a sleeve, and it's like, oh no, this sucks. I feel like hamburger meat. You know, it's raw. It's terrible. Yeah. And then people can't sit through it. They squirm through it, or they, you know, get antsy. And also for, again, me with my sensory issues, that's maybe where I'm proud, is not so much of the tattoo itself, but the fact that I could actually get myself to calm enough to endure it and sit through it, because I'm so hypersensitive to so many things. Yeah. You know, just the lights, you know, the shop had, you know, like a drop ceiling, and like, oh, you don't have any like this, but like, you know, those long rods with the, you know, I can't think of what the name is now, but those kind of lights, and they would flicker. and they'd buzz.
Oh gosh. And then you have the buzzing of the guns.
And then I have
yeah.
that, and they're off from each other. So it's like someone being offbeat, right? You know? So there was that. And then there's the sensation of being tattooed. And then there's all the muscle aches from having to hold a certain awkward position the entire time that you're getting the work done. And then, you know, just, okay, I have to go to the bathroom. How long do I wait until this so I don't have to break this up too much? You know, so there's that. And then, like, I'm shoving sugar in my face and I'm trying to read a comic book because I'm just trying to, like, focus on anything else but what's happening. But that was a point of pride because I figured, like, if I could do that and sit still and not freak out, not have any tics, because I did, you know, have, like, tics that came from, like, high stress situations when I was a kid. If I could get through all that, then there's very few things I probably should be avoiding because I probably can get through it. I've just been telling myself I couldn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like one of the first times you put yourself through that optionally because you wanted something. So
right. It's one thing when somebody inflicts pain on you or something happens to you. That's a certain type of way of getting through that situation. But when you put yourself in a position of, like, I don't even need to be here, and I'm paying for this, right? And I'm, you know, it's a discipline thing. I think it's a little different. It's like people who go work out.
Yeah.
You can have a naturally beautiful, slim figure. That's great. But when you work to get that figure, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
You can be blessed with genetics, or you can, like, work to make that happen. It's just, it's a different type of feeling.
And I guess that's something I never really attributed to tattoos. Is a feeling of, like, I earned this.
I earned it. Yeah.
I suffered for this. And it takes a different layer of appreciation, you know, into it.
Which is why I don't look at my tattoos. So I went out with a guy once who didn't like my tattoos because he said it.
Bad call.
Well, he said, oh, some man's put his mark on you. And I go, okay. And he also didn't like, you know, I mean, this is when I was really young. And he also was just like, you know, oh, I would never date a woman who already had kids because there's some other man, like that man, like it's like a man put a mark on her, a man ruined her, right? Yeah. And I go, well, this is more for me than it is for them. So my tattoos, I don't feel like are like a walking portfolio for those artists that have worked on me. It's my story, like you said earlier, like on me. You know what I mean? Like I'm being transparent with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like where I was in my life.
And they share a place with you in that. Like, I think just like you said, it's a place in your life. And for me, like my least favorite tattoo is my first. It was my side. And I totally agree. Like, because I went through a more uncomfortable one, everything after that has been a much more pleasurable experience. Because, like, oh, if I could do that, I should be fine.
Right.
But even if you don't resonate with the idea as much over time, it is a time capsule to who you were and what was going on at that point. And, like, if you enjoy it for what it is, you can get over your small taste changes or your complaints of how it came out in some ways.
Right. Unless you have some dude's name on you and then just cover it up.
Name tattoos, unless it's your own, are almost always a bad call.
Yeah.
Have you ever talked someone out of one?
Oh, all the time.
Cool.
All the time. So
a couple walks in, you're like, how long you been together? And they're like, 3 months. You're like, no chance.
Yeah. So like, I won't do a couple of tattoos. I won't do any tattoo that is associated with any like cult or like a group, like no gang tattoos, like nothing like that. If I'm not part of it, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Get someone who is a part of your thing, because there's probably one tattoo artist among them, right?
Yeah.
To do that for you.
Is there a lot of people who want cult tattoos?
Not so much. Well, okay, so I had a guy who wanted like a Scientology tattoo. Like he wanted their specific cross done. And I recognized it because there's a lot of that in Los Angeles. And I said, like, I mean, I can do it, but I would suggest that you probably see someone who shares your faith. And the only reason for it was because it's such a destructive sort of culty thing. But I mean, I'll do Christian stuff because
you know that background and you've been a part of that.
Yeah, I do like Catholicism, like, you know, dogmatic images and stuff like that sometimes. And you know, if I have someone who's like Muslim or Jewish or whatever, and it's something that they can show me, like it's part of, then I'm like, okay, I'm sold. Right. Yeah. Like, of course, absolutely. I'll do that for you. You know, I will give you that thing that you need. not that I never met a Muslim who wanted to get tattooed, but you know what I'm saying. Like I don't know.
Sometimes it goes against the religion itself to do that. Yeah.
So I'm not sure about that specifically, but like just in general, like whatever your thing is. But that one, I just was so familiar with how toxic that one was. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And then, I've had bikers come in and they're like, oh, I want this, this, and this. And I'm like, that's probably gang affiliated or group affiliated. And I just don't know enough. Yeah. And so I don't want somebody rolling up on my shop. Well, because I did something that I wasn't supposed to do.
Totally. And there's also a level of reference in saying, if I don't know it, I shouldn't implement it on you for the duration of your life. It's like, it's not
and
your
I don't
place.
do foreign languages for that reason. Because I don't know, I don't trust the translation if it's just like a Google Translate.
Good call.
So if you don't speak it and write it, don't pull something from the internet. Don't type in, love in Chinese, and then just like let Google whip it out and then ask me to do that because it may be wrong. And kanji and like katakana, like all that stuff, it's so complex. Those Mandarin, all that's so freaking complex that like I'm probably going to get it wrong. If I even just have the wrong stroke and the wrong part, it changes that entire character. Yeah. So you could even have had it perfectly translated, but then I have to be super careful that I'm not, missing some detail of it, because there could be two characters that look so similar, but one has like a thicker line here or like a dash here, and then it's a whole different word and meaning.
Yeah. So did you continue with pursuing the bodysuit after you had done the sleeves, or had you kind of moved away from that after that breakup into saying like, okay, I'm in a different era of my personal tattoos?
So I started like the bodysuit concept. We broke up. I was going to continue that. But just with a different artist, because the way it was placed, I had a setup to where filler could be put in and it wouldn't look too weird. Mm-hmm. So I had hunted out a couple artists, and like I said, I've got some different pieces, and obviously my sleeves are done by Brian. But I kind of stopped with the full bodysuit when I started modeling, because that was a vintage thing. So it was like, and I shouldn't even say modeling. It's not, it is, but it isn't. It's like, it's amateur, right? I was never like booked with an agency or anything like crazy like that. I did a couple music videos. I was an extra,
Yeah.
But stuff like that. But like,
it feels printed. If you were paid, like the moment you're paid, I think is when it really becomes a profession. If you can make a living, even if it's not sizable, it's like, it takes that step. But it's interesting for that to kind of reprioritize that project. Like,
I just put it on a hold at that point. Mm-hmm.
And what kind of defines a bodysuit?
Just for me anyway, it's just full coverage. Okay. Tattoos everywhere. Yeah, coming together, and they don't have to be the same thing. So it's not like you have to have like a themed sleeve even. It could just be patchwork, and so many people have full bodysuits of just like little pieces that they've just gathered over a long period of time. Yeah. And some just full blown go in for, marathon sessions and sleeve out a leg or an arm, over 2-3 days or whatever. Yeah. So it's different for everybody how they approach it, but it's that full coverage. And I want it from like my toes to like up under here, just covered. Yeah. Right. So I'm glad I took pause, because in that pause, I was like, okay, so what do I want to do with my legs? Because that's the only real estate I really have left, So it made me like kind of rethink, like, what do I want to do? And I decided that instead of trying to have like one artist do my whole leg, that I'd rather have sort of the patchwork and be more of an art collector versus a walking portfolio piece. Because again, it's for me. Yeah. Right. And it's telling, right? So it's like, well, I want to, maybe get a tattoo here for this achievement, or this tattoo because of this situation. You know what I mean? Like my chest piece is for my mom. It's her old camera, so, and like this piece on my neck is for my grandmother. I don't have anything for my dad because I can't nail down one thing that I want for my dad. So I'm still like working that out. My kids, just, different parts of my life. Like, I want to do those things, but I just want to like do it right. And I want to find a good artist. And it's hard when you're constantly, like you said, gig work. Like I'm hustling, I'm doing this, that, and the other. And I don't give myself enough time to go get tattooed. Yeah.
Well, and I imagine that at this stage in your career, it's like your level of particularity for the piece of real estate, for the artist. It's like, as you've learned more, you kind of want more from that experience. So I think some people get addicted to that process and addicted to the adding of wherever it is. It's like, and you really do start to burn through real estate, with your C stock, D stock, like your lowest level ideas at time, because you're just so into continually getting tattooed. It's a part of who you are.
Well, and it's funny you use the word addiction because one of the other reasons that I had a pause and a slowdown in my tattoos was when I had my kids. Because I got a lot of stuff done in a very short order between like 18 and 21. I was also an addict. I was also drinking all the time. I mean, how I even got through classes in college is shocking, right? Because I was, but it was the only thing that like slowed me down enough that I wasn't just constantly fidgety. I always felt out of place. I always felt very awkward. So alcohol did two things. It calmed me down and slowed the ad machine in my brain. But then it also was an excuse. So if I did something stupid or if I said the wrong thing, instead of trying to explain my neurodivergence, or not have an explanation and then befuddled and like stammering and, just make more of a fool of myself, I was just drunk. I was just buzzed up. I didn't mean nothing.
Yeah.
It was, you know what I'm saying? It was a way of me being able to detach. Maybe I shared a little too much. Maybe I was a little too clingy to this person, or maybe, whatever embarrassing thing. And then, because I'm shit. I didn't need to be drunk to trip over stuff and fall. Like I'm so clumsy, like an awkward person, and I ramble, right? So it excused all that.
Yeah.
And so I was way more, and I took pills. It was like, a thing. Like I had so much addiction issue, but in that time frame. And I also was constantly addicted to going to the tattoo shop and getting something new and adding this and adding this and adding this and adding this. And then when I found I was pregnant with my oldest, she's 20 now, or she'll be 20. I had to quit everything cold turkey because I was pregnant. I was like, I have to stop.
Yeah.
I have to stop everything. I can't do anything. It was brutal for a couple weeks, but then I had the best pregnancy ever. Both my kids, like super easy. Because I didn't have all that toxicity in my system anymore.
Yeah.
And I didn't get tattooed either. I mean, granted, you don't get tattooed when you're pregnant, but even in the downtime between or, after, it took me a little while before I went back in to get my sleeves worked on. And so with that, I even noticed that that's when I had like a little, like, I wouldn't say relapse, because I didn't go stone cold sober. Like I was very sober, but I'd have a drink every once in a while, after that big stop with, my kids. But I started getting tattooed more when I drank more. There's like a lot of things that are tied into that, like addictive personality. It's like a switch flips.
Yeah.
And it's like I have to do everything hard. I have to go at it hard. I have to do everything 110%. And so I was constantly on edge and anxious, and, getting tattooed kind of helped me not think about that because something hurts. It's similar to, I think, the concept of like when people cut. And I work on a lot of people who I'm covering those scars for them. And when we talk, it's very much the same process that they're unfortunately going through and I wasn't going through. But maybe they were young, so they couldn't get access to alcohol and drugs or getting tattooed because they were too little, too young, whatever. And so they turn in on themselves to like soothe.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's just like I was doing the same thing. It's just it looks prettier at the end because it's a tattoo instead of just a scar, right? Yeah. And and so I do some repair work on people, who have that. But I also tell them too, I'm like, don't be afraid of those scars because you were in a dark place, but you're not there now. That's why they're not fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many things that people ask to have beautified through the tattooing process. Yeah. And it's such an incredible thing that you can do for folks.
Yeah.
My last tattoo was the first time I was sober for a tattoo, and it's like I was wondering how different that experience would be. But I think the longer that I've been sober, the more I notice that like life is pretty much the same thing. It's just I'm not thinking about that external, But especially with pot, it was just like the disassociating would happen so much quicker. It was less of a
you blink and it's over.
Yeah, exactly. It's less of a aware choice to disassociate from that feeling.
A sober tattoo, like I was sober when I got my neck done, and I was such a bitch about it because I was like, I did not realize how numb I really was, and I got tattooed when I was young, until after I was clearer, and now, I mean, I'll have times where I'll drink. And I had gone out for my birthday and went too hard, which was a couple weeks ago. And I thought to myself, ooh, I don't like this. Like, I don't like me being this way. I don't like how I feel about me. So why would I do that to myself? And I think that helped tremendously, because I was just like, okay, I won't drink tomorrow. I won't drink. And I just haven't, you know, since that point. Now, may I, at some point in time, yes. Which is why I don't do the whole like, oh, I'm sober so many days or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I know me, and I know that, like, I'll go months, years, and then I'll, go out to a bar, you know what I mean, or whatever. And with what I do with the photography, I'm in bars sometimes, or venues with people having tons of alcohol or whatever. But I just look at it and I'm like, I don't, if I don't like something about myself when I'm in that situation, then, like, why am I going to put myself through that again? And I'm not afraid of not having my mask on anymore. That was another big part of it, is like trying to be stoic through the process of getting tattooed. Like, I'm a bad bitch. I can handle this. So it's like, drink. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like, take this painkiller or whatever, like, I can boss out and I can get through it. And I don't need to do that. I'm a grown ass woman. I don't need to put myself through that if I don't want to anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think it's tough when people put up boundaries that are crossable by your own temptation. It's like, it's best to say I'm choosing not to than I never will again.
Yes. Make a conscious choice every day. Wake up.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that today.
I feel much more comfortable with that freedom than I would with the other.
Right.
So how far were you into your personal tattooing process before you said, I would like to be on the other end of this?
Pretty early. I did my first apprenticeship in 2002. And
your first tattoo was 2001?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I had my back piece done in the summer of 2001. And then I took on an apprenticeship in 2002 into 3. And unfortunately, I didn't get along with the owner. And so that ended really much quicker than it should have. Or I guess it was probably better that it ended. I guess. I don't know how to describe it. Like, I look back on it and I'm glad I didn't stick with him and work in that environment, because it wouldn't have been good for me. But at the time, I was like, fuck this dude, right? Like...
Well, it seems like the old style of tattoo parlors and owners was pretty... aggressive isn't the word, but people were being taken advantage of. Like large percentage of commissions, forcing people to work certain styles of hours and certain styles of work for their own comforts. Like, it makes more sense why folks go independent.
Yes. Now, I will say, for me, being independent, it works because I constantly study tattooing, right? So, like, when I'm not at the shop, I practice, I draw, I watch videos of other artists. If I get a chance to go to a shop, I would love to do more guest spots and conventions, because there is nothing like watching another person actually tattoo in front of you. So I would love to do more of that, because I feel like there's only so far, I'm at like a plateau with education for myself, but I'm constantly wanting to learn something. Like, I'm never satisfied with knowing this much of it, because I realize it's an iceberg.
Do you ever let folks guest spot in your location?
It's too small, really. And I just downsized to save money so that I could, again, get out and travel. I'd much rather go to them than invite them in, because that feels a little too, I don't know, it feels a little too personal for me. That's something I'm, like, working on. It's just like, this is my space. It's my safe, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, my space. So I haven't done that. I don't have any apprentices. I don't feel like I'm at a point in my career where I should be telling someone else how to do this. So I don't have that. I'd much rather just go. Yeah. And also, I love traveling, so it's an excuse to take a road trip and get the heck out of Dayton for a little bit. You know?
And so you had taken this apprenticeship. It kind of fell. Did you immediately find a new place? No,
I decided to just finish up college and go. That's when I went into corporate work. That's when I started working in, like, screen press. I used to work for a couple of print companies that just, like, did T-shirts and stuff like that, and it would be me either on a press or doing graphic design work for the shirts.
And so when did you kind of return to this?
2015.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, were you just filling up your sketchbook and kind of accumulating ideas, or did you always kind of know that this was eventually going to be your repertoire for that?
So I thought, okay, well, now that I have my formal art education or whatever, from going to school for it, I went back to the idea of doing comic books. So before I went to college, I got to go to a comic studio, like it was Marvel, you know, I got to go like kind of like do like they had a tour or something like that. And like some other things. And I was like, oh, there's an internship program. Like there's just all this really like kind of neat stuff. But at the time, I'm trying to think of what was going on at that time. It was something along the lines of like, you know, they were doing the X-Men movies back then. And it was like Sony who owned it. And it was like all this stuff where like, I guess Marvel was selling off a lot of intellectual property. I don't know the whole story about it. But basically, it seemed like it was an industry that was going to crumble, that just comic books are going to go away. Mm. And my aunt and uncle were like, you know, I know you want to do art for a living, but it's not really practical to be a comic book artist. How long is that going to last? If only I could have seen all these movies that came out, you know, like since then. And a lot of comic artists will tell you it's so hard, you know what I mean, to break into it and, you know, all that good stuff. And to work for like a bigger company, like I would have probably been eaten alive at Marvel or DC or Image or whatever. I was not that strong within myself as a person and solid enough to be able to do anything on that level. But I met a lot of good artists, and then I met a lot of independent artists. I started doing the Comic Cons a lot, and I worked as a volunteer for Wizard World for many years because of that. So that
What is Wizard World?
Wizard World is like it was a catalog that you would get. Again, I'm dating myself, and it would give you all the comics and like what they were worth back in the day.
Very cool.
And then
so it's like the Trader's Guide. It's almost like the Kelly Blue Book of comics.
I think so. Like I think that's probably a good analogy for that. I don't remember it that well. Like I remember seeing them in the comic book store when I would go like get my stuff, you know, and kind of thumbing through it. And I'm pretty sure that's what it was. But they had a convention circuit. So basically they would buy out local comic conventions, repackage it. So it's like almost like what do you call it? Like a franchise, I guess. So they would relabel it as Wizard World. And so, like, they bought out the Columbus Comic Con and made it Wizard World. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. You know, I want to do that. Like, I want to, you know, draw. And I met all these independent artists, and they had their own comics they were working on that were not part of Marvel or DC or any of that stuff. And some of them had their own lines where they were actually doing it. It's kind of like musicians with, like, indie musicians having, like, their own labels. So a lot of these comic artists, they ran it like a music label.
That's super cool. So like they're sharing printing outlets and they're utilizing the supplemental business that come along with that.
Right. So you'll have like you know, like someone who like there was one that I worked for, Studio Akumakazi. So there's like one guy who like owned that, and he was a writer, and then he would source out and like seek out talented artists to then draw his books, you know, what he wrote, and then he'd hire other artists, you know, and then whatever profits they would get from those comics, I'm assuming, would go right back into the studio to improve the studio or to get supplies for everybody or to pay them or what have you.
Super cool.
Yeah. So again, kind of like a record label, I guess. I don't know how record labels really work, but I imagine it's something like that.
I think at this stage in the game, it's kind of questionable how they work. I think it's someone says, I'm good at the business side of this, let me handle this, and that's just the label they put on it, you know?
And that's what he, you know, BJ was really good at, like pitching, putting comics in stores, doing the setup, and you know, so people could see it, knowing where to put it in the store. So like if you're looking for something very specific and there was a book that they had that would be a good complement to it, like where it even to, like it was very strategic. He was really smart about that kind of stuff, and I learned a lot of that in my marketing classes in college. So I could see where he was going with it, like what he was doing, you know, to try to push that.
So you have this kind of short career back in the comic world, and how does that steer you into re-pursuing the tattooing?
So it didn't. It steered me into pursuing the photography first. So the job I actually had was, like I said, it was like a volunteer thing, and then every so often they'd pay me to do like social media. But I worked on a team of photographers that would go and like take photos of all the people in cosplay, the cosplay contest, all that stuff. I had just started shooting a couple of bands, but I wasn't taking it super seriously. This was like 2010, and I had like a point and shoot, you know. And then by 11, I've got like a nice camera and lenses, and I'm starting to learn more about how to use these cameras, because again, everything I'd had before then was like 35 millimeter, you know, film cameras, you know, or the little box. You know, like that's the only exposure I had to photography, and having to develop your own stuff, you know, or take it somewhere to go get it, and then being worried about how it's going to turn out. So the digital thing was game changer, obviously.
Absolutely. Not to hand off your material and hope it comes back how you want it. It's
Exactly.
Like, no questions. You walk out with the SD card. You have that freedom.
It pops up immediately, So it was really cool because it's like finally photography could keep up with how fast my mind worked. So I didn't get bored of it or lose track of it. Because that's the thing, like out of sight, out of mind, it's really hard for me to like stay on something so long, if that makes sense. And so with the photography thing, one of the things that would drop off is like I would have cameras just sit for months, in my apartment before I'd go run to go take them to, go and develop sometimes.
Yeah, do them in a batch of like the last 3 months of my life. And then,
right. And so, so working around the comic artists gave me an outlet to draw. But again, I'm still doing corporate work. And by 2004, 2005, sorry, I'd had my daughter. So I'm raising 2 kids. Their dad's in Afghanistan. And the Comic Cons were a good reprieve from just all the hectic, crazy at home and the corporate job and the constantly having all this demand on me. And it was so weird because working in that environment, one of the things I didn't like about it was that because I was female and I had kids and they knew I was single, they treated me as if I was always a risk because, oh, well, you might have to call off to go take care of your kids. I got paid the same as my male counterpart. That's not where the divide is. It's, you're a woman, so you're going to flake. You're a woman, you won't be able to handle this. You're a woman, you're going to choose your kids over this project. And I was always treated like that. And so I was always like at the bottom rung. But then they were the most reliant on me because I always showed up because I needed the job.
Yeah.
I needed it more than my younger counterparts because I had 2 kids to raise. So it's just this weird dynamic. Like I didn't like that dynamic. With the comic books, it was so cool because it's like everybody just piles in. Everyone's different. Everyone has different perspectives. But again, nothing ever like really worked out for me because I didn't have enough time to dedicate to it fully. I didn't live around all of them. I'd meet people from different states and different cities, and it was just hard to make it work. And there's just never enough money for me to travel or invest. And so I was like, okay, well, I won't do that. So I did the photography because, again, it was like the upfront investment on the camera was all I had to do. Everything else is just maintenance, right?
Yeah.
And so that was really fun. I got to go to all different cities with that. And then at the same time, I got the job with the Cavalcade of Customs in Cincinnati.
What is that?
So that is a car show, indoor car show, and they have like new cars, vintage cars, all that stuff. And I met a guy in an art gallery who was like the load-in like organizer. He, made sure all the cars were in, who was going to be showing what, how the displays were set up. Like he ran the floor. And he was like, hey, you do this pinup stuff. Because I also was doing the pinup modeling. So like all of a sudden it's like 2009 through 11 was just like this pile on of all these creative things that just all kind of hit at the same time.
Yeah.
But while my kids were still really young, so it was really hard for me to take any one of them and do it as big as I wanted to do it because I didn't have the investment into it. But he saw me all, dolled up, and he said, would you like to run a contest? And I said, I've never done a pageant or a contest before, dude. I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. I was like, what am I going to do? And so I winged it, and I'm still working with them now. Like I have like 4 cities I'm doing next year for them. Like I've worked for them all these years.
And you run the pageant?
Yeah. So I do so I take in like all the registration. I set all that up online. And then I, get the gifts and the sashes and the crowns and, sometimes the sponsor, sometimes other people do that. Or the car show just pays, winnings to the girls, and, sometimes I MC it.
Yeah.
So, I just do all those little things so that the guys don't have to worry about dealing with that.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing. I love women. Listen, I'm a woman, but man, you can't get 25 of us in a group in a competitive environment and it not just drive a dude nuts, right?
I think
but same with the car guys. They're just as much divas too.
The people that want to be in that kind of competition, you put 25 of those in a room, and it's like, yeah, these people are all capable of slitting each other's throats.
It's all this alpha energy, right? It's all like main character energy. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And each one of them individually are wonderful. Yeah. I mean, there's maybe in all these years a handful of people that I'm like, I would never talk to them again. But I mean, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of these ladies, and they're phenomenal, and they always have like cool careers or jobs, or their moms, or like they're so multifaceted, right? And so they're amazing to me, and I only get this short amount of time to actually communicate with them. So it sucks for that. I can't be friends with any of them because then it's like, well, if she wins and, so there's a lot of cattiness and kind of like bitchiness in it because it's competitive.
Yeah.
But overall, it's great.
So all this is colliding, and you have a 5-year-old and how old are your kids at this point?
3 and 5.
That is horrific timing.
So I'm traveling. I'm literally taking them to photo shoots with me because, again, I never did nudes and I never did anything really super risque. So anything that was, where I knew it was going to be like G rated, like, and it was going to be like just a cute little vintage house and I was going to wear like a dress. My kids came with me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'd dress them up and they, I'd see if the photographer would take a picture of them for me just to, you know what I mean?
That's cool keepsakes to have.
It is. I have a beautiful one with my daughter and she was so tiny. I mean, she's smaller than the guitar. You know what I mean? Like I was holding a guitar, it was my dad's guitar as like a prop, and she's so small, she's so itty bitty. You just swoop her up, and it's still one of my favorite photos, of that. But yeah, so I was doing that, and I was traveling and doing that, and I was starting to get published. Pretty much right after I took a couple of photo shoots, I was getting published pretty quickly. I had met a couple of really awesome high-end models that were real models, like models that actually did it for like a whole career. And they were very enlightening to me. And then the offer for Hustler came around that same time too, but I said no because I liked doing the retail stuff and being a merchandiser and helping them open stores and like that back end thing. I didn't want to, have my kids find, mom's boobs on the internet. You know what I mean?
Well, it also seems like the further you go into any of these niches, the more you have to do just one thing. Right. It doesn't seem if you're not satisfied with just one aspect of any of these jobs.
No.
It's not just tattooing, it's the studio. It's not just photography, it's the client relations. It's not just emceeing the pageant, it's finding who makes the crowds. It's like
yeah, it's all those things. Yeah.
So why would you pile on tattooing at the same time? Like, why would you get...
Yeah, because that came a couple of years later, 2015. So I had lost my corporate job because I chose... So what it ended up being is my son has autism, and he is, I wouldn't say so more severe, but like further in a certain direction on the spectrum than like I am, right? So he had a lot of issues with behavior in school. And so I would constantly have to go like pick him up or do therapy with him and things like that. And I was taking all my vacation time to do that. I would just like chunk out an hour, 2 hours here and like just vacation time, like, or my sick leave or what have you, that I accrued. And they did not like that. And I said, okay. And again, it goes back to that whole thing of like, you're a woman and you have kids and you're prioritizing them over your job. And we need people who are going to prioritize this to keep things moving because we have quotas and we have this and we have that. And again, they're a corporate entity, right? They don't care about what my life is because I'm a means to their end. So that's when I decided, I said, I want a job to be a means for my end. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I want to be able to collect money, like that. And then I realized, no, I don't really want that because I don't want to treat people like that. I don't want my clients to feel like they're just a means to an end. I don't want them to walk out feeling like, oh, she just took my money, right? So then I thought, well, how can I make enough money to live and take care of my kids, but avoid having that dynamic ever again, where it's just this constant tug of war of like being used, right? Because even in modeling, I felt like I was just a commodity. I'm a product. I'm two-dimensional, right? And people even outside of it would treat you as such. I can't tell you how many times somebody walked up while I was like actively doing it and just wanted to stick a photo or a phone in my face and like get a photo, random time in a grocery store, stupid shit, you know what I mean? Or like at a car show, and I'm like trying to go to the bathroom. It's like, dude, I will be back at the booth in like 5 minutes. I have to pee. This is not the time to take a picture. I'm going to be squirming. Like, just...
this is the human being time where it's like, I don't need you in my way.
Right. Yeah. I'm having a human moment, not like a display moment. But when you do something like that, you're constantly on display. And I learned a lot about that through working at the Comic Cons, because sometimes I would go and, as a volunteer, they would replace you. So sometimes it's like, well, I don't want to take any more photos. I've tapped out. I've shot everything. And they'd say, oh, well, relieve this person so they can go to the bathroom and work this table. And like, you hand the photos, take the money, they sign it, move on or whatever. So I got to sit next to some people that, do movies and TV. And it's very much the same dynamic that I was going through. And they kept warning me. They're like, almost everyone I would talk to is they're like, yeah, you shouldn't do modeling like that. Like, it's just going to get more exploitative. And when they started, when I started hearing feedback, like, you should get this tightened, or you should do this, or you should change this, or you should change that. And I was like, okay, I'm out.
Yeah.
Like I don't,
And they start to dangle the carrot, like it starts to be bigger money for things you're less comfortable with. It's like, that's...
Yeah, it felt very, it was like a parasitic relationship, like, and I didn't like that because I didn't understand my worth at that time. So I didn't realize like they needed me, a photographer that's not doing well, that gets a model that pops off. She's the one who's really doing it. It's not his photography over every other photographer, right? Yeah. That's it, but I didn't understand that worth. And so I was just like, okay, well, I guess I'll go along with it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it wasn't any good. So I wanted something non-predatory that I could do, something that I felt like either I was helping people, and a lot of clients help me, to be totally honest, because we have deep conversations and that helps me. It's therapeutic, and connect, because I was so disconnected. I was the only kid between my parents. And yeah, I have cousins and aunties and uncles, but I was constantly passed around. So it's like, pack a bag and move, pack a bag and go, pack a backpack, going over here for the night. So I was always like disconnected, new kid in school. I had a lot of schools I transferred to. So there was not like this settled home family thing that I ever had. And so doing conventions was like, oh, this is nice, because it's like I have a convention family, right? Like I only see them a couple times a year, but we're cool, and we talk to each other on social media and all this other kind of stuff. But it was easy because I was already used to that dynamic of like, they're going to have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have to go. And I won't see them for 6 months. But then when we do, it's like nothing ever changed. And so I really vibed with that. And then so I have that kind of same relationship with like my tattoo clients and like bands I photograph that I actually get to know. It's like we may not see each other every day. And, but there's some bands I've talked to so deep that I'm like, I know them probably better than some of their friends know them. And the same in reverse. But we're not just like right on top of each other all the time. So I found that those things worked together. The tattooing worked because it's something I could do close to home and still be able to like take off and leave if I needed to do something for my kids. And the people were understanding because I'm dealing with one person that I have to reschedule and not like a team that's counting on me or a corporation that needs to do you see what I'm saying? Like make a quota or have a project go off. That one person is relatable. Like they can understand like, hey, I've really got to go get my kid. He just got into a fight, or, his nose is broken. One time my son's nose was broken, like right in the middle of a session. I was just like, and at that point his dad had him. So I was like, okay, I'll just go in a minute, let me finish this up real quick. Yeah. And I can do that, and with the photography thing, it really doesn't make me a lot of money, but I really enjoy it. And it's opened up doors in other ways that aren't like money. Right. And I mean, I've had tattoo clients come from meeting them at a show.
Yeah.
So that's pretty rad.
I think it's like, it's really interesting the way that you describe all these relationships. Like, you don't have to be everything to everybody,
mm-hmm.
and you don't have to continually be everything for someone. Mm-hmm. But during an appointment, it's just you two that exist in the world. When someone is at the end of your tunnel vision, it's like, that's all that exists in this moment.
Right.
And, I describe certain people as living at a certain reservation of depth. They don't fuck around with small talk. They don't do things that don't matter to them. It's like finding the many dimensions that kind of presence and I don't know, that kind of expression and that kind of care for people is applicable. That's kind of well-rounding of your career to end up in a place where it's not just one way that I communicate with you,
mm-hmm. but
it always has that certain level of depth where I'm going to give you everything for this amount of time, and then we're going away.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's a perfect description of that. It's so weird because it works for my work, but it doesn't work in other areas. So like having a boyfriend, right? You know what I mean? Like unless there's somebody who travels a lot, we're going to get on each other's nerves. If we're not like equally like on our grinds, it never works out. Like and I haven't dated like a whole lot. I had 2 really long-term relationships really most of my adulthood. And it didn't work out and I couldn't figure it out. I was like always like, oh, it's me. I'm too hard to deal with. I'm too much and da da da. And then I would get bitter and be like, no, it's their fault because they couldn't accept me. It was neither one of those things. It was you have to meet people where they are and not where you want them to be. And you have to really truly see them, but you have to see yourself first. And I'd always masked, right? Just to try to fit in or not seem so weird or what have you. And drinking doesn't help, right? That whole situation. So being clear on what you actually want and what they want. You know what I mean? It's so much easier to negotiate that when it's photography, right? Because it's like, okay, hey band, hey musician, you want really killer shots of yourself, right? You want them to be clean, crisp. Like, I know how that works. I know what they expect of me. I know what they want, right? And if I can deliver above and beyond expectation, great. But most of the time, I'm going to hit the mark. You know, like, I know what they want. I've done it for long enough to know. Tattoos. Okay, they give me their idea. I hash it out. I do some sketches. This is what you like? Yes. Boom. Done. Bigger things you can't, you know, always negotiate so easily. I wish you could, because I think that would be phenomenal to be able to just be like, okay, this is what I like and expect, and cut through all of the like, oh, let's get to know each other and let's go on these dates and let's go to, like, no, like, okay, let's have, you know, one big, very vulnerable, brutal conversation. And then if we do not like what we hear, we are free to step away before there's any attachment.
Yeah.
Like, I really, like, speed dating is the stupidest fucking thing to me, because I'm like, you just get enamored and you get into like limerence and, you know, what you imagine that person to be, right? I want a marathon. Like, I want to talk for 3-4 hours to you while eating mushrooms over like, like, you know, some big topic, right? You know, something that, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? You know, like how did you handle that? You know, have you ever experienced real loss? You know, things of that nature. Like, and not because I want to hold it over their head, or, you know, not because you know, it's not like fear porn or anything. It's not like, you know, the same as watching like, you know, 48, was it the last, or was that show, the first 48? It's not like that kind of thing where it's like, I just want to see, you know, something play out or the drama of it. It's more of just like, that is more telling of what I can expect from you.
Well, I think the really basic parts of chemistry have nothing to do with how partnership evolves. It's like,
it's so
just because
weird.
we have things in common doesn't mean we work well.
It's so counterintuitive.
Yeah. My mom always told all of us growing up, like, you don't know someone for the first 2 years that you're around them. And then after that, like, because I need to see you in all 4 seasons, good, bad, in between, all of it.
Yep.
And then we start to figure this out.
Yeah.
It's really interesting with my wife. One of the big things I feared was stepping into marriage and the idea of having a family and all this, which meant reprioritizing my values of rock and roll and what I wanted to do and touring and things like that.
Right.
Until I could totally understand how she viewed me, which is the version of rock and roll and touring that she wanted me to be able to have. Like, to reprioritize my life around her didn't mean me changing what it was, because she could actually get to know me. But so many of us put on a face when we first start seeing somebody. Even in friendships, it's like you pretend that you can be everything to somebody all the time, and I will let you down in that. Versus, I love that in my life, it's like I can entertain you for 4 hours with the best and the worst moments of my life in these songs, and we can even talk on the set break the entire time. Don't call me after the show. You know, it's like I got things to do.
I got things to do.
Yeah, I got someone else that we're gonna do this. I can be your best friend for that amount of time, but, you know, do I get to have the same friendships as people that work in an office together? And when we get off, it's like, oh, now I have absolute room for you. It's like, no, it's this very particular lens of this thing. And thank God that you've done the introspection to find these places where not only is it valuable, it's indispensable to the experience. Why does someone come to you for this tattoo during a hardest part of a holiday season to memorialize a hard thing in a beautiful way? It's like, because you feel that, because you know that. And for this portion of their day and for the existence of that piece of real estate, you are everything all at once until the end of that session. And then let's slap that Venmo and get the hell out of here. I got life to live, you know?
Right. And they're the same way. Like, it helps them get that catharsis, right? Feel those feelings and feel them fully, which I think is why it should be considered more therapy in a, you know, a right set and setting, like, you know, how they have music therapy and art therapy and all that stuff, because it truly is. And I've learned a lot about how to get past my own issues by other people talking about theirs and then how they overcame them, more so than like probably therapy by itself.
Yeah.
Right. Just, you know, sitting with a woman who's maybe like 20 years older than me, going through a divorce, or who's done a divorce, right? You know, who's been through that. and her getting a tattoo for someone that she's lost, or like for her kids or what have you, and being able to just have that conversation back and forth about like, what was it like to go through that? And like, how did you feel about yourself in that? And, all these things, and listening to that and going, oh gosh, I know that feeling. So one, I'm not alone in that. That's not weird. And then two, but look where she's at. So it's almost like, oh, well, if she could go through all of that and be here, then I can get there, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing I miss with not having deep connections with family members. Both my parents are gone. I don't have any siblings, and everybody else in my family is spread all over like different points of the country. Some are still overseas because they didn't come from Cuba. My dad's from Cuba. So yeah, everyone's like all spread out. So it's just like me and my kids, and you can't get that exchange from your kids.
Yeah.
You need to be the one that like they come to for that.
Yeah, you're the unbreakable foundation,
Right. And now I'm glad my kids know I am fallible and I'm not, Wonder Woman or anything like that, because they don't have this unrealistic expectation. And I think they're more well-rounded in knowing that I have struggles too, because when they see me struggle, but then I get through it, and then they have a similar struggle, they're like, oh, well, mommy got through it, as opposed to thinking mommy's perfect.
Yeah.
And so nothing affects mommy. Because I think that's why a lot of kids go like, everything affects me. And like, we get so histrionic as teenagers, because like, we're like, everything's happening to me and it's terrible, and like, you don't know what it's like. You've never lived this life. And it's like, no, I did. I totally did. I know exactly what you're feeling like, but sometimes you can't tell kids that, but if you're living it and you're vulnerable with that, and I mean, there's a line, there's certain things my kids do not know.
Yeah.
Because they weren't old enough, and I wasn't going to put them through that or have them see that or what have you. But as they get older, and now that they're adults, my son's 18, so my youngest is 18, so they're both grown, right?
Yeah.
So, now it's like I could kind of, if it comes up in conversation, be like, well, I went through this kind of thing too, and then that's much easier than telling them what to do.
Well,
it's to be an example of what to do.
You always got to weigh, do they want to hear, I understand you, or tell me more?
Right.
And having people in the chair is an interesting place to learn how to navigate that.
Yeah.
I always find the silences in tattoo appointments to be like one of the most interesting, because a conversation ends, you're not forced to go anywhere else. You're just kind of you're stewing in that experience.
Yeah.
And there might be something from 40 minutes ago that you remembered, and now it's time to rehash that again.
Right.
But the moments that it hangs, it's just like it's a refresh and a discomfort all at the same time. And
yeah, my demeanor's changed incredibly. Just in the same way, I can see how getting tattooed so frequently lined up with my addiction. I can see that the way I would talk with clients and how I engage with clients lined up with my healing. The more I healed that, not to get too woo-woo, but like the more that I kind of healed that like little kid inside of me and stopped like freaking out and masking and feeling like I was a weirdo or an outsider or whatever, like the more I put that stuff down, the less and less I speak in the sessions, because I don't feel the need to fill the void with constant talk, right? Because you can let the silence hang, and there's a lot to know in that silence, and there's a lot to figure out, and a lot of internalization, and letting it like actually hit and like roll over you, and you know what I mean, and really take it in. And again, that might be why I do better with friendships, relationships that are at a distance, to an extent. There are times where I'm like, man, I really need a hug right now, or I need somebody like right here, and I feel that. But I think that my wherewithal and like the emotional strength comes from the fact that I can't just get that easy access to have something else soothe me, because I'm not drinking it away. I'm not smoking it away. I'm not, having someone just yes man me and like agree with everything, and like that just buffers it. Like I have to actually feel my feelings and like work through that and figure out like how much of it is me, how much of it's just a circumstance, and where do I put this, and now how do I go forward? And I have to roll through all of that without outside soothing, which is very difficult for neurodivergent people sometimes to have to deal with, is like, how to self-soothe, and my son, I remember even talking to him about that, like things to do when you're feeling like your brain's overactive, or where you're feeling just so overwhelmed with everything. So yeah, so like how I am now is, if you'd met me like this 10 years ago, it would be a totally different scenario.
Yeah.
Right. And listening to other people, you know, and letting it actually hit me what they're saying and taking a pause. I was so afraid to do the radio show when I started because I was like, I'm going to talk right over them. I really was, you know. I was always told I talked too much whenever I did have someone to talk to, because there would be such gaps of time of being alone that when I would be with a best friend or, you know, a boyfriend or whatever, it's just like, you know, or client even, just trying to like make up for all this time where I was alone. And now I'm like, oh, I don't need to do that. You know, it's fine. Well, we have whatever we're going to have. And if it means we sit in silence together, that's great. If it means you put your earbuds in while I work on you, that's great. If I go to a show and no one sees me and I know no one and I just go and I do my thing and then I just escape like a little ninja out the back door, you know, whatever, it is what it is, you know, and having that detachment of like not having an expectation of like anything like that is so helpful. But tattooing helped me understand that more and like really make that concrete, you know, for me. So it's like therapy was great, but like all that really interpersonal communication and work with people one-on-one really taught me a lot about that kind of thing. So it's deeper for me than just like, oh, it's a job that makes me money.
Yeah. That was all really beautifully said. As we start to wrap up here today, is there anything in particular you want to promote?
Oh, geez. So I just moved my studio from Moraine to Centerville. And so I will now be in Centerville, Ohio. Yay. Which is just a little bit south of downtown Dayton. So if you're familiar with Ohio and Dayton, I'm just a little south of Dayton. Yeah, I mean, everything you can find online, you know, it's Forte Studios Ltd, like limited, like Ltd, all one word, .com. Same for my email, same, you know, you can get a hold of me, you know, if you're local and you want to like get a tattoo or whatever, but, or need a photographer, you know. I will say I don't do like big weddings. I don't like there's certain things I don't do. I don't do realism, you know, but you can like look at my website and see, you know, all the things that I do or kind of have my hands into.
Cool. I think your art in general speaks for itself. It'll be clear the things that you do really well and the things you're like, oh, I'd rather not, you know?
Yeah.
So your Instagram and your Facebook are tagged below in the comments. So check it out, everybody. Nikki, thank you for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
Come back anytime.
All right.
All right, peace, players.